mugwumps, they're everywhere. They're speaking out at board meetings, city hall, town square, courthouse, state house, even the White House. They must be stopped. They are disruptors.
Welcome everyone to episode number 1 of Mugwump Media, or I guess I should say, welcome to Disruptor Central. Isn't it amazing how all of Trump's nominees now are being called disruptors? You know what? That's kind of prophetic, and it's actually historic. This is something, believe it or not, that has happened before. That's why it's so great to keep an eye on history and not do away with it. My name is Juanita Bright at Disruptor number 1 microphone, officially, with my husband and co-disruptor. He's over there at the soundboard with his own microphone. Kevin, make yourself known.
I am now known.
Thank you. Now, I'm sure right now, if you guys have just tuned in, you are wondering, number 1, what the heck is a mugwump? And number 2, what is the meaning? What's the correlation between this podcast and the mugwumps? Well, first of all, I'm going to answer that question. Number 1, I can sense right now that you all are getting out your phone and you are Googling what is a mugwump. Stop. Don't go any further. I, right here in front of me, have the definition, and I'm going to read it to you right now. Now, the mugwumps, according to the dictionary, was a bolter from the Republican Party in 1884. Now, what is a bolter? I'm not quite sure, but I believe that it's probably someone who basically picks up and leaves in disgust because things are not going the way they philosophically or economically believe should be. And I'm assuming that's what that is. Definition number 2, a person who is independent, as in politics, or who remains undecided or neutral. I had somebody tell me the other day whenever I was explaining this, they're like, wait a minute, we're not neutral, we're not fence sitters. Well, they were called fence sitters. That's why the term mugwump was used to describe them, and I believe that it was actually the Republicans that got mad at them. They felt that they were basically turning against them, which they kind of were. But there were some old political cartoons at that time of a bird with their mug on one side of the fence and their wump on the other, indicating that they were independent and nonpartisan. But you have to understand, it wasn't necessarily that they were turning against the Republican brand. They were turning against the corruption that they saw starting to come about in the Republican Party. And, you know, that really resonates with me because we've got a lot of that going on now, too. Let's see. Number 3, mugwump. It's an anglicized version of a word used by Massachusetts Indians to mean war leader. So that wouldn't really apply to mugwumps, but it could have been taken from it. And it could mean someone who is a leader, someone who is speaking up, someone who is taking charge of the situation. That makes perfect sense to me. So the mugwumps, this is the official definition. The mugwumps were a group of reform-minded Republicans who broke away from the Republican Party to support presidential candidate Grover Cleveland in the 1884 election. And I've already described to you what mugwump was kind of picturing, somebody who's sitting on the fence, according to the angry Republicans who were distancing themselves from them. The mugwumps were reform-minded Republicans who were dissatisfied with the corruption and political cronyism within their party. Now, the official definition was patronage, which I looked that up too. And basically, what patronage is the use of state resources, and that could be money or it could be a job, to reward individuals for their electoral support. Oh my, that sounds like pay for play or pay to play, doesn't it? This can include the power to give out government jobs, contacts, or favors. Oh my, don't we see a bunch of that in play at this point? So again, what has been before will be again. Whenever too many people get in with too much money, too much power, in position for too long. Let's see, reform-minded, cronyism. They supported Grover Cleveland, the Democratic candidate. And again, I know I've got people out there that are going, no, we don't support Democrats. But keep in mind, things were much different then. And at any point in time, a snapshot of what a Democrat and a Republican is changes. Things shift and change throughout the years. At that point, like I said, the Democrats had been crushed during the Civil War and beyond. And Grover Cleveland, believe it or not, whenever he was elected president in 1884, he was the first Democrat to actually be elected since before the Civil War. And the reason he got elected, he actually was a good guy. He was really pretty conservative. I'm going to give you a little bit of information about him, too. But they supported him, the Democratic candidate, because they believed that he was a more honest and reformist candidate than the Republican nominee, James G. Blaine. And here is something very interesting that I think is contemporary to today. The Mugwump's break from the Republican Party was a significant event in the history of American politics, as it highlighted the growing divide, listen to this, between progressive and conservative factions within the party, and their desire for political reform and a more balanced approach to economic issues. Folks, this was a Democrat, and he was much more economically, fiscally conservative than the Republican was. And again, the Republicans had been in power for quite some time and had quite a machine going on. This important shift came as reformist-minded citizens sought to challenge the entrenched power of political parties, and a push for a more responsive and accountable government. I don't know if you all are thinking what I'm thinking. I'm thinking I'm a mugwump. What do you guys think? I love the picture, by the way, of the pit bull with the nice little 1880s suit on. I think that's pretty appropriate, too. We're pretty nice. We're pretty civilized looking, but we can bite a little bit, too, if we have to, and bark pretty loud. Grover Cleveland, I'm going to tell you just a little bit about him, but I'm not going to go on too long. He actually was the first and only, he was the only president to have non-consecutive terms until, guess what, November 5th, 2024. Donald J. Trump was the second and only other president who won non-consecutive terms. This is kind of prophetic, don't you think so? It's kind of clearing up some of what we think about this situation. Now, he did not win in his next election. It was against Benjamin Harrison. Benjamin Harrison, the way he won is that there were some issues that came up. Apparently, Grover Cleveland was kind of a bad boy. He apparently had a relationship with a woman, had an illegitimate child, had the child taken away from her because she was apparently an alcoholic. And, you can imagine in the 1880s, this just didn't go over well with the public in general. So the Republican Party put that information out there, and he became somewhat unpopular because of it. So Benjamin Harrison got in. And the hallmark of his administration was unprecedented economic legislation. He really put the hurt on some of the businesses in the U.S. with tariffs, and his federal spending reached $1 billion for the first time ever. This was a Republican, folks. The spending issue, in part, led to the Republicans' defeat in the 1890 midterm elections. Benjamin Harrison, to this day, is seen as an average president, not too good. But the crazy thing is Grover Cleveland, he did well. Now, Grover Cleveland, unfortunately, because of the economic circumstances that he was given after Mr. Spendthrift Harrison spent 4 years in the White House, they had something that occurred in 1893, which sparked a severe national depression. It was called a national panic. And many voters blamed the Democrats, opening the way for a Republican landslide in 1894. But Cleveland was great in many ways. He was actually a union buster when it came to keeping the railroads moving, which was good. He also supported the gold standard. The manipulation of silver, he was very much against. And he was, today Cleveland is praised for honesty, integrity, adherence to his morals, defying party boundaries, and effective leadership. Typically, he was ranked and still is ranked in the middle to upper tier of U.S. presidents. So just in case you didn't know about Grover Cleveland. Now, you can see right now, right, that this really, in many ways, links that time to this. And I guess that would be the thing that I would say, is this is a time like that. Question number 2 is, what's the correlation between the Mugwumps from 1884 and now? A podcast headed up by a very diverse, ragtag little bunch of disruptors in Ozark, Missouri, which would be us. Probably the most remarkable similarity to me about this historic time is that unaffiliated coalitions are being built, like the Mugwumps in 1884, except that this time, the Grover Cleveland figure is Donald J. Trump, and the coalition that produced his historic non-consecutive second term is a coalition of, this time, instead of Republican fence-sitters, it's frustrated, disaffected Democrats who crossed over, hoping for a better choice and a better future. And when I say that, I think of all those voters across the blue states, across America. I'm thinking, too, of the politicians, of RFK and Tulsi Gabbard. And here's the deeper truth of what I believe is going on. Like the Mugwumps in 1884, us in 2024 have woke up to the reality that a political system that we trusted and believed in to be our representatives for decades has developed some corruption, a lot of corruption, unfortunately. The Mugwumps had one-party rule, and the Republicans that had overseen the abolition of slavery and kept the Union together had over time become corrupt. And unfortunately, that very same scenario, I think, has happened in our time. But this time, the vehicle of corruption is a deeply embedded managerial state, there's no other way to say it, that has developed over decades in a uniparty, which is made up of both Democrats and Republicans. Well, they cooperate to hide it, to feed it, and to keep it basically in power over we the people. Now, in America, and folks, we need to get this in our hearts and in our heads. So many of us don't have any idea who we really are in America and our very unique founding. Other countries had kings, had emperors, had people who told them what to do. But in America, we're unique in our founding, in that citizens led from the get-go. The early Puritans who settled in America in the 1600s, they founded the cities on the East Coast. They had town hall meetings in the very same building where they had church services on Sunday. There was and is no actual separation of church and state in our founding documents. It's not there. And when the leftists try to tell you that it is, they don't know what they're talking about. That document does not exist, okay? And what leftists hold up as the separation of church and state is a letter that was written by Thomas Jefferson in, I believe, 1802. It was written to the Danbury Baptist Association in Connecticut, and they had asked for clarification of their rights. And again, keep in mind, this is their history. Where did they come from? The Church of England ruled over them and with an iron fist, and they wanted to make sure, they wanted to clarify and make sure that that was not going to be the case in America. So whenever they wrote to Thomas Jefferson, he clarified for them his belief that religion should be between individuals and God and not subject to government interference. And that has been absolutely twisted in today's society. But the true meaning of it is that it was to protect the church from government persecution, like in England, but it was not to keep the parishioners out of public affairs. We have fallen victim to that. Pastors, churches, they won't talk about politics. They're shamed into silence, believing that there's supposed to be, and again, I'm waving two fingers in the air, this separation, imaginary separation of church and state. And keep in mind, in America, we didn't need a king because we were and still are the king. And we answer only to God, we the people, under God, our creator. and our rule of law, which is based on the Ten Commandments.
Yes. To bring it to the here and now, over the last couple of years, it's become blaringly apparent that we've got a long list of wrongs that we really need to set right. It's time for us to occupy this territory. It's time for us to stop killing our babies. It's time for us to put prayer back in school. It's time for us to hang the Ten Commandments back on the walls of our public buildings. Our goal here is to encourage conversations back into the town square and to lead our nation back to our foundation, that foundation built on those Ten Commandments. And there was written all the book of the law, all the book of the hope of the New Testament. Our hope in this is to introduce many of you to some of today's mugwumps and really fan the flames of this awakening. This disruptor thing, it's not new for folks in Missouri. Turns out that Mark Twain, you can't get much more Missouri than Mark Twain, but he was quite a disruptor. When Twain spoke out at rallies in favor of Cleveland, Teddy Roosevelt called Twain the most dangerous man in America. Sounds like he was quite a threat to democracy. It would be interesting to hear Twain's rendition of what woke is today.
Right.
I think he may have been ahead of his time. Matter of fact, I'm sure he was. Mark Twain called out the media years ago, and this is a quote from him. He wrote down, "If you don't read the newspapers, you are uninformed. If you do read the newspapers, you are misinformed." Fake news mugwump style. Well, all right, Juanita, what do we need to say before we end this conversation?
I think that we just need to tell folks that this has been a fun time. This has been great. And I am truly looking forward to the next time that we get to visit with them.
Yes.
And we'll be back soon, folks, on the air. And we're hoping that you'll join us. We're going to bring other folks on. We're going to have some neat interviews. We've got some other folks that are going to be working with us on a regular basis, doing some informational roundtables. And what we kind of touched on, we felt very strongly that there needs to be, and there already are a few. There's some radio shows in Springfield. There are some podcasts around. But we specifically felt called to do something to help inform our local patriot community and just folks. We the people. It's time for information, and it's time to stop shrinking and start speaking, right?
Yep. Hosea 4:6, "My people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. Because thou hast rejected knowledge, I will also reject thee. That shalt be no priest to me, seeing thou hast forgotten the law of thy God. I will also forget thy children." We can't forget our children.
Nope. We've got it. But God wants our obedience, and we need to be obedient. Well, folks, we hope that you have a great rest of your day wherever you are. And we'll be back on the air soon, bringing more of the Mugwump team to share information and conversation that's always informed and inspired and independent. Have a great day, and God bless.